I'd just taken the last tray from the oven when I heard them laughing upstairs. The house still smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, Wyatt's favorite. I didn't knock, just walked up with the plate still warm and paused outside the guest room. Their door was half open. I heard my name. "She's got no clue," Talia was saying. "We get the doctor's note filed next week, and by Christmas we're in court. Once the guardianship's approved, we control everything." I didn't breathe. Wyatt replied low and calm, like they were planning a vacation. "We'll move fast. House accounts, everything. I already pulled her retirement info. She won't even notice until it's done." "Don't be so sure," Talia said. "Old people get twitchy. Just keep smiling. She still thinks we're here to help." I took a step back. My heel touched the wall. The tray tipped slightly, but I caught it. Not a sound. Just stood there while my son talked about dismantling my life like a filing cabinet. They weren't arguing. They were aligned. Practiced. I turned slowly, one foot after the other, down the stairs back into my kitchen. I set the tray on the counter and stared at the cookies. They steamed in the cold light. I'd added extra nutmeg this time, because Talia once said she liked the flavor. I poured tea with hands that didn't shake. Not yet. My body sat at the table, but my mind was replaying each word: guardian, court, control. I thought of how many nights I'd gone to sleep believing kindness was still enough. I left the cookies on the table. By the time they came down an hour later, smiling like nothing had shifted, I was already planning where I'd start looking for the papers I hadn't seen, but knew they had. They moved in with 3 boxes and a story about bad luck. Talia had just lost her job. Wyatt's business partner had walked away, and the rent on their Boulder apartment had jumped again. I didn't hesitate. My son needed a place. Of course he'd come home. I cleared out the guest room myself, folded fresh sheets, set out towels. Talia cried when I offered. "Just until we get back on our feet," she said. "Thank you, Mom." She was the only one who ever called me that. A month passed. Then 2. Wyatt started his new business from my office, converted the sunroom with my desk and printer, and never gave them back. I co-signed the first loan because the bank said he needed a guarantor. Only for a year, he promised. That was 18 months ago. It defaulted in 10. Talia got pregnant briefly. A loss early, but enough for me to start covering her health insurance when Cobra ran out. She said she'd pay me back when she got settled. I never asked again. They bought lattes. Most mornings had groceries delivered, took weekend trips to Estes Park. The mail was still addressed to me, but the home had shifted. I found my casserole dish in their bathroom, once holding hair products. When I asked Wyatt about rent, gently, just once, he looked offended. "We're family," he said. "Is that what this is about now?" So I stopped asking. I'd gotten used to hearing them laugh through walls. I didn't know what those laughs meant until yesterday. Tonight, at dinner, they passed the salad like nothing had changed. Talia complimented the vinaigrette. Wyatt poured my water before his own. They think I'm soft because I fed them, because I said yes too many times, because I believed they'd leave on their own when it was time. I couldn't sleep. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. "We control everything." At midnight, I gave up. I walked to the kitchen to make tea. The house was dark, quiet, still pretending to be kind. The trash hadn't been taken out yet. The bag was over full, bits of mail, vegetable peels, the plastic seal from a bottle of juice. I went to press it down, and something caught my eye. Legal paper, folded and crushed like someone had panicked. I pulled it out and smoothed it against the counter. Petition for temporary guardianship in the matter of Marlene Voss. My name, bold, cold. I read every word. The document claimed I'd shown persistent memory loss confusion in familiar environments and impulsive financial behavior. There was a section titled Risk to Self that said I'd recently attempted to withdraw a large sum from my retirement without understanding the consequences. That never happened. There were notes in the margins, red ink, slanted handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists, and post-it notes stuck to my fridge. Need doctor's sign-off by 12:15. Mention Thanksgiving incident. Don't forget POA clause. Talia. At the bottom of the form, the line for proposed guardian had Wyatt's name, typed clean and professional. I stood there for a long time. The floor felt suddenly uneven. My kitchen, the one I built with my own money under my roof, with my light fixtures and my dishes and my name on every utility bill. And they'd written me out of it with a printer and a pen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I folded the petition back into thirds, careful not to tear it, and slid it into a manila envelope from the drawer beside the fridge. I labeled it in pencil proof. Then I turned off the kettle, walked down the hallway, and opened the closet where the safe was tucked behind old coats. It was time to see what else I still had that they didn't know about. The combination hadn't changed since Robert died. I turned the dial slowly, feeling the soft click with each number. His birthday, then mine, then Emily's. The safe opened with a groan. Inside the deed-old tax files, my will, our joint savings certificates, and the note Robert left me in 2004 when he refinanced the house without telling me. Don't be mad. We're still covered. I promise. I smiled at that, folded it gently. Then I took everything else out and laid it across the dining table. The same table they sat at every night. The one Talia decorated for Halloween 2 months ago, like she already owned the place. I created 2 folders, one labeled Legal, Originals, the other copies, External Counsel. I made a list of everything they didn't know was still under my control. The house was in my name only. The mortgage had been paid off in 2011. The updated will signed 2 summers ago after my surgery left. Everything to a local charity Robert and I used to support. Not a word about Wyatt. I hadn't even told him it existed. I didn't think I needed to. By morning, I'd packed a leather briefcase I hadn't touched in 10 years. I called the Denver office I remembered from my tax advisor days and asked for someone who understood urgency and discretion. They gave me a name, Elena Rios. Her office was tucked behind a florist and a cafe downtown, the kind of place no one would think to follow you into. She greeted me in a charcoal blazer, no small talk, just sharp eyes, and an open notebook. I handed her the petition I'd found in the trash and said, they plan to file before Christmas. I want to sell the house before then. Quietly. No signs in the yard. No calls to this address. She didn't blink. Cash buyer or agency sale. Whatever closes fastest, I said. She nodded, slid the petition aside, and opened a clean folder labeled Client Action Plan. That's when I knew I wasn't alone in this. When I came home from Denver, the house felt different. Still quiet, still orderly, but there was a smell of printer ink in the air. The kind that lingers after someone's been working late at your desk. I went straight to the office, the one I used to call my study before Wyatt turned it into his workspace. Papers were stacked neatly, too neatly, like someone wanted to erase the evidence of a mess. The bottom drawer stuck a little when I pulled it open. Inside were folders, labeled with my handwriting, but one was off. The label said insurance, but the ink looked fresher, darker. I opened it. The first page was a power of attorney form. My name typed across the top, my signature at the bottom. Only it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong too tight, the slant too sharp. Whoever wrote it had practiced. My stomach turned cold. There were more behind it, drafts of authorization letters, financial statements with notes in Talia's handwriting. Get this notarized. Use the same pen. Check spelling. Each one carried a new kind of insult. I gathered everything, carefully slipped the folder into my tote bag, and brought it upstairs. In the bedroom, I shut the door, powered up my old laptop, and began scanning every document one by one. My fingers stayed steady, even when my chest didn't. By the time I finished, there were 36 images in a hidden folder. I renamed them with dates and uploaded them to a cloud drive Robert had helped me set up years ago. Then I composed an email to Ms. Rios found additional forged documents. Sending all for review. Assume this accelerates the plan. She replied within 15 minutes. Understood. I'll initiate the sale immediately. Timeline 1 week. I stared at the words 1 week. For years, this house had been my proof of stability. Now, it would become my proof of survival. Downstairs, I heard the front door open and Wyatt's voice call out, too casual, too light. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and reminded myself that everything he thought he controlled was already slipping away. By the end of the week, Ms. Rios had done what I didn't think possible. No open listings, no photos online, no signs in the yard. She found a private buyer through a colleague, a widow from Flagstaff who'd been looking for a move-in ready home closer to her daughter. Cash offer. Close by. December 22nd. I met the buyer once briefly in Ms. Rios's office. Her name was Margaret, and her eyes held the same quiet weariness I'd seen in my own mirror. We didn't talk about holidays or family, just signatures, initials, and dates. She thanked me for keeping the house in such good shape. I told her to take care of it. The transfer was clean, the funds cleared within 24 hours. Ms. Rios texted me when the wire hit my new Chase account. Confirmed. Your liquid and your name is clear. I stared at the message for a long time, not out of joy, but relief. For the first time in 2 years, I was no one's dependent. That evening, Wyatt and Talia were out dinner with friends, or maybe just time spent somewhere I wasn't. I walked through the house room by room. The framed pictures, the furniture, even the chipped mug on the counter. All of it felt distant now, like it already belonged to someone else. In my office, I took out a fresh manila envelope and wrote in careful black ink, "For Wyatt." Inside, I placed the signed purchase agreement dated, notarized, and final. A record of the transaction they would never undo. I left it in the safe exactly where I knew he'd look first when things started to fall apart. Then I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the winter wind scrape across the window. By morning, my suitcase was half packed and my train ticket printed. The house wasn't mine anymore, but it was finally out of their reach. The guest house smelled like clean wood and lemon oil. Small, quiet, just enough space for me and the suitcase I'd packed. I'd left before sunrise slipped out, while the house was still sleeping. No note, no goodbye. Just the gentle sound of the door clicking shut behind me. December 24th arrived gray and brittle. I spent the morning making tea, listening to an old jazz record Robert used to like. The phone rang just after 1. Wyatt's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom." His voice was light, but tight. "Where are you?" "The Hendersons just got here." "You didn't say anything about leaving." "The turkey's in the oven." "Talia says you didn't text her back." I held the phone to my ear for a moment, watching the snow fall gently against the window. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said. "Check the safe." A pause, then sharper. "What top shelf?" "You'll know which envelope." I ended the call. For a while there was silence. Then my phone buzzed again twice, then 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. I just sat there holding my cup with both hands, waiting for the next part to unfold. 30 minutes later, Ms. Rios texted, "Received message from Wyatt's attorney." Panicked, asking if the sale can be reversed. I told them no. That was enough for now. I pulled the curtains closed, set the kettle back on the stove, and let the quiet settle around me. The house was gone. The papers were real. The bank account was mine alone. Let them shout. Let them scramble. I had the only thing they never expected me to take, back my freedom. It was late on the 23rd. I hadn't slept. Not really. I lay still in bed, half covered, my ears attuned to every creak of the old floorboards, and the wind outside brushing against the eaves. Then I heard its soft footsteps in the hallway. I didn't move. Talia's voice was hushed, but the walls in that house had always been thin. Friday. We'll own it, she whispered into the phone. The notary said she just has to sign the form. She's too tired to read half the time anyway. She has no clue. Silence. Then a low laugh. By the time she realizes what happened, the ink'll be dry and the deed transferred. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I sat up. I walked to the desk by the window and pulled open the drawer. There, beneath an old checkbook and a stack of Christmas cards, was my will, the real one, signed just a few months after Robert died. It left everything to a local nonprofit in Denver, housing programs for women over 60. Quiet, necessary work. The kind no one ever thinks they'll need until it's too late. I printed a copy and placed it in a folder. Then I opened a blank document and began typing. It was exactly the kind of will they'd expect everything to Wyatt and Talia, split equally full of flowery language about family and legacy. I misspelled a few words on purpose, made the signature slightly crooked, even smudged one edge with tea. By dawn, I had both versions ready. The fake one went back in the safe, slid neatly beneath the sale contract. The real one was folded sealed and tucked deep in my purse. Let them find what they were looking for. Let them believe they'd won. By the time they read it, I would be long gone. The first message came from Ms. Rios 3 days after Christmas. Talia filed a complaint in county court. Alleged elder fraud and financial manipulation. She claims you were coerced into selling. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest house, reading the words twice before replying. Then we'll give them what they asked for. Proof. Ms. Rios already had everything: recordings of Wyatt and Talia talking about the guardianship plan, digital copies of their forged forms, notarized timestamps of every document tied to the sale, and my psychiatric evaluations from 3 separate doctors. Each one certified my mental competence in clean clinical language. She filed our response within the day. I didn't have to appear. Ms. Rios told me that sometimes the best defense was silence, when the facts were already louder than any argument. The hearing never happened. The court clerk sent an email 2 days later confirming the dismissal. Petitioner failed to provide sufficient evidence of incapacity or fraud. That evening, I turned off my phone and sat by the window, watching the reflection of the mountains fade into night. I didn't feel victorious. Only still. The next morning, Wyatt called from an unknown number. I didn't answer. He tried again and again. Then the messages came long, frantic, stumbling between apology and blame. I deleted each one without listening to the end. When Ms. Rios called that afternoon, her voice was steady. It's done. They can't reopen it without new evidence. You're free of them legally. Free. It sounded unfamiliar on her lips, like a word borrowed from another language. I thanked her, ended the call, and opened my notebook. The next page was blank. I wrote one line at the top: Glenwood Springs, rental options. It was time to find a place where my name was the only one on the door. By New Year's Eve, I had the keys to a place that didn't carry anyone else's name. A modest 1-story house on a quiet street in Glenwood Springs, walking distance from the grocery and the post office. Clean walls, no history, no shadows clinging to the corners. The movers dropped off my things on a Tuesday morning. I tipped them in cash and told them there was no need to set anything up. I'd do it myself. Piece by piece, just like I was putting myself back together. There was no guest room. Not because there wasn't space, I could have made one, but because I didn't want to. There were no spare keys, no welcoming basket, no notes left on the fridge for visitors. The house didn't need to be shared to feel full. I walked every morning 30 minutes through the brittle air scarf, pulled tight, breath fogging in front of me. I waved to neighbors I hadn't met, past mailboxes with other names. No one asked who I was. No one asked who I used to be. In the top drawer of my desk sat the deed signed, stamped, and filed. No one could take it. Not anymore. Beside it was a folder marked December. Inside were copies of the court dismissal, the psychiatric evaluations, the notarized sale agreement. I didn't look at them often. Just knowing they were there was enough. I kept my phone off most of the time. When it was on, only 4 names were allowed through Ms. Rios, the bank, the doctor's office, and the heating company. That was it. Everything else could wait. Or disappear. In the kitchen, I made soup for one. In the living room, I read books out loud to myself sometimes just to fill the air. At night, I slept without checking the hallway, without listening for footsteps that weren't mine. I didn't send out a change of address form. Anyone who needed to find me already had. The rest didn't need to know where I'd gone.